Hope Church, it's the fourth day of Holy Week. It's Holy Wednesday, or as some in church history has called it, Spy Wednesday. And they call it Spy Wednesday because it's focused on the person of Judas the betrayer. And I just want to read Matthew's account of Judas in Matthew chapter 26, verses 14 through 16. It says, "And then one of the 12, the man called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, 'What are you willing to give me if I hand Jesus over to you?' And so they weighed out 30 pieces of silver for him. And from that time, Judas started looking for a good opportunity to betray him." Now, first, it's fascinating that hundreds of years before this ever happened, it was prophesied in Zechariah chapter 11 that he would be betrayed for 30 pieces of silver and it would end up in a potter's field. That's another story, but I want us to focus in on the idea of just Judas, the person Judas, and ask the question, how did he miss the point? How did he miss that Jesus didn't come for an insurrection? Like, what was the motive behind Judas betraying him? Yes, it was all a part of God's plan, but what was it inside of Judas that made him open to that? Was it because Jesus wasn't working on his timeline? And I wonder about you. Do you start to have doubts about who God is because Jesus isn't working on your timeline? And then in Matthew chapter 27, we see how Judas, after he realized what he's done, he's carrying all this guilt and the shame. It says, "And then Judas, his betrayer, seeing that Jesus was condemned, was full of remorse and returned the 30 pieces of silver back to the chief priests." And then he didn't know what to do with that. The guilt and the shame. And the scriptures tells us that Judas went out and took his own life. How did Judas miss the point? How many times did Jesus say, "Your sins are forgiven"? How many times did Judas hear that and see that in somebody else's life, and yet he missed it for his own? So, today on this Holy Wednesday, just remember that Jesus has come to take away your guilt and your shame. You don't have to carry it. And with praise and thanksgiving in our heart, as you think about Judas, give God praise that you don't have to pay for your guilt and your shame. Jesus has already done that on the cross.